This is part 3 of the lecture on methods of assessment used in special education. My name is Dr. George Giuliani from Hofstra University, and we just finished up our first method of assessment, observations, and now we get into the second one, which is an interview. And you all know what interviews are. You've all been interviewed. You've probably interviewed other people. But an interview is an actual assessment technique, and it's conducted either face-to-face or by telephone between an interviewer and an interviewee, where recorded responses to questions are obtained. So we interview people. You're either the interviewer, the person doing the interviewing, or the interviewee, the person being interviewed. Now, there are two types of interviews. We have a structured interview and an unstructured interview. And as we'll see in special education, we'll use a combination of those two to get the information that we often need. Structured interviews are interviews whereby a predetermined set of questions is being asked. So this is an interview where we have very specific questions being asked, and we ask those questions exactly as they are written down. And we've all had these types of interviews where everybody gets the same question asked the same way. It's a structured interview. But then there's the unstructured interview where there are no predetermined questions being asked. This is where we just kind of free flow with our interview, and it just goes wherever it takes us. And so there's nothing predetermined, there's nothing structured about it. But ultimately, most interviews will combine structured and unstructured interview questions. So you would ask someone a various question that might be structured, but then based on the answer, you might go off the beaten path and ask different types of questions related to that situation. Now, what are the advantages of an interview? Well, the advantages of an interview is that they are personal, they're emotional, and they are flexible. Personal, emotional, and flexible. And when you think about interviews, I can get really personal in an interview. I can actually get to know the person that I'm speaking with. I can actually discuss real issues with a particular person. And what goes along with that is that they're emotional too. I can get to see the emotions of the person. I can see if the student is crying, getting angry, getting upset. And the other great thing about an interview is that it's flexible. 1 minute I could be asking one question, and then based on the answer that's given, I could turn it in a completely different 180-degree direction based on what's being told to me. So again, the great things about an interview, the significant advantages of an interview is that they are personal, they're emotional, and they are flexible. But there are disadvantages of an interview. Interviews are time consuming, okay? When you do an interview and you do it well, it could take a half an hour, 45 minutes, even an hour. And when you're talking about a school day, that's a lot of time to be giving up when you're interviewing a parent or interviewing a student. So anytime you do an interview and you do it well, it'll probably be time consuming. Second thing about an interview is that they are costly, okay? Interviews are costly. And that's important to understand, maybe not in a school system so much, but in life in general. Anytime you do anything that takes time, it's going to cost money. One of the significant disadvantages of an interview is that you often have to be concerned about the rapport between the interviewer and the interviewee. And when I talk about rapport, I'm talking about the language, I'm talking about the relationship between the two individuals. When we talk about the rapport of two people, we're talking about the relationship between the two. And we know that when we don't get along with people, or we feel like we're not making that connection between us and somebody else, it can be very hard to open up and talk about things. We've all been in these situations, whether it's at a party, whether it's at a job, whether it's somewhere where we meet somebody and we just don't connect. We just don't make that connection. So we always want that rapport to be good, because without it, the student may not give enough information or tell you what it is that you need to know. And then finally, the last disadvantage to understand for an interview is that we often have to be concerned about either a student's language ability, and I could often talk about the interviewer's language ability. If I don't understand what a student is saying, or you don't understand what I'm saying as the interviewer, it might be tough for us to relate. It might be tough for us to have a deep conversation because we're not understanding each other and we're not understanding what we're saying. Ultimately, interviewing a student in question, his or her parents, teachers, and other adults or peers can provide a great deal of useful information about the student. And in the end, what are we talking about with an interview? Interviews should be conversations with a purpose. That's what an interview is all about. An interview should be a conversation with a purpose, and the questions should be designed to collect information that relates to the observed or suspected disability of a child. So when I interview someone, I want to know that I've asked questions that really have meaning, that I'm having this conversation with the student or having the conversation with the parent that has purpose. And my whole purpose is to collect information that relates to the observed or suspected disability of the child. So when we talk about methods of assessment, we'll always be doing interviews. And in the end, that interview should be a conversation with a purpose. And we'll be interviewing a lot of different people, teachers, students, parents, to get enough information so that we can make decisions about this child later on when we're making final determination about whether the child has a disability and the needs of the specific child. And that ends part 3 of our lecture on methods of assessment. You can go to part 4 now, which will begin with portfolio assessments.